Mark, you have brought in the story, as did I, and it's pretty outrageous. From Everett, Pennsylvania, the freethoughtproject.com reporting. These guys get some really great stories.
Yes, they do.
An amazing job. At Everett, Pennsylvania, a teenager is facing 2 years locked away over some offensive photos posted to his Facebook account. The photos depict him in mock sexual positions with a Jesus statue, and the Jesus statue does not appear to have been harmed during the incident. KRON Channel 4 reports the photos were taken and uploaded in July in front of the Love of the Name of Christ Christian organization in his hometown of Everett, Pennsylvania. The young man has been charged with desecration of a venerated object.
Well, it certainly sounds like that would be love in the name of Christ.
Oh, God. It's ridiculous.
Which is defined as, quote, defacing, damaging, polluting, or otherwise physically mistreating in a way the actor knows will outrage the sensibilities of persons likely to observe or discover the action.
Well, okay. So that doesn't sound like a law that should exist in the United States.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But it's only because it's nebulously written. Like, defacing something that's not yours, that should not be legal, right? Damaging something that's not yours, that should not be legal. Polluting something, I'm using all the words from the statute here.
But damaging a statue of Jesus Christ should cost you the cost of repairing
the statue, not 2 years in prison.
Right. I mean, if you've defaced it, you need to make it right. And I think that to some extent you need to sort of make people happy in the way that you do it. But there's some things that just don't matter. Like taking a picture near it. Like what is defiling? This clearly is. But what if he'd just gone and put his arm over the shoulder and acted like he's buddy-buddy with Jesus?
Well, I think that sort of the most nebulous part of this is the next word, which is otherwise physically mistreating, the next several words there, in a way the actor knows will outrage the sensibilities of persons likely to observe or discover the action. So that's, if they're going to be convicting him on something, that would be the area, right? Because he's not defacing, damaging, or polluting the statue by pumping it,
right,
or whatever it was that he was doing.
Basically,
he is not. So the question is, what is the definition of physical mistreatment? What's the legal definition of that? What do you consider physical mistreatment? I mean, that can mean anything, from what I can tell.
Yeah.
It's a very general set of terms there. And so he's been charged with desecration of a venerated object. It is a charge that was often used against people who burnt American flags in protest.
I mean, I think that just about everyone will agree is a constitutional right.
No, I don't know if everyone.
What?
I don't know if everyone will agree with that, Mark. This is the flag you're talking about. People, their logic goes out the window when you talk about this object. It's sacred to people.
Well,
yeah.
yes.
There's less than 50% of people support flag burning.
Oh, I'm not asking if whether you support it or not. I'm asking whether you consider it to be constitutional. Okay. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me that the burning of the American flag is a constitutionally protected act? Now, I'm not asking,
so long as it is your American flag.
I'm not asking about, somebody else's flag. I'm asking about your flag, and potentially on property that you own or control.
Totally protected. Or it should be.
And I think that every court that has looked at this has said the same thing. That's why I'm saying that everybody who, isn't mentally ill thinks that this is constitutionally protected. They may not like it, but it's protected.
No, I get your point there. But that's why they have laws like this, so they can get around those obvious free speech violations. Now they can just simply say that, well, this is our law here, and it's desecrated a venerated object. People venerate this object. It's been desecrated, 2 years in prison.
Good enough.
And they've used this charge against people who burn American flags in protest. I don't know how successful they were with those, but I imagine they were successful, because if someone doesn't challenge it, if they just pay the fine and they take the plea deal, then there is no way to uphold the Constitution or to uphold free speech. So to uphold those things requires someone who's willing to go through the court process, and someone who's willing to go all the way to the Supreme Court, which can be a multi-year-long journey.
Yeah.
And very, very expensive journey. In Texas v. Johnson, Johnson was charged with desecration of a venerated object for burning an American flag during the 1984 Republican National Convention in Dallas.
Good job, Johnson.
The case brought to light questions about whether or not expressive acts were protected under the amendment. The Supreme Court ultimately decided that the burning of the flag in protest was in fact protected speech, since it was done in an expressive manner with obvious political intentions. It's important to note that any act may be protected or not, depending on context and intention. For example, if a flag was burned in protest, it's protected speech. If it was burned as an act of vandalism, it's not, which makes sense because then it wouldn't be your flag and then it would be property destruction in that case. If the young man was expressing his distaste for the church, then legally, this is the opinion of the freethoughtproject.com, then legally, per our Constitution, these charges must be dropped. However, that won't stop them from continuing on with the prosecution. And I sure hope this young man is going to be lawyering up rather than cutting a deal, because I'm sure the way it's going to go is the way it goes for almost every teenager, is they scare the crap out of them with the court system, and then they offer them a plea deal. And look, buddy, all right, you're faced with this serious 2 years in prison over desecration of a venerated object. Tell you what, we'll reduce the charge to a violation level disorderly conduct, and you can get 6 months probation. How about that, kid?
Sounds right.
So I have a little factoid for you guys. So apparently,
factoid is not necessarily true, but in some cases.
Okay, well, a fact then. In 2003,
Bit of trivia.
Yeah, a small fact, a factlet.
It's true. The word factoid has become to mean something that is actually a fact, but a not very important fact. Right. But ultimately, the original definition was something that appears to be a fact, but is not true, from what I understand. Yeah.
On June 27th, 2006, the Senate voted down a proposed flag desecration amendment by the slimmest margin ever. The vote was 66 to 34.
An amendment?
Yeah, an amendment.
Wow.
To the Constitution. Yeah.
But that doesn't end it when the Senate votes.
Sure.
Yeah. The vote was 66 to 34 and was just one vote short of the 2/3 needed to approve a constitutional amendment.
Wow. That's
for
shocking.
the Senate.
One vote of destroying free speech
would have made it federally illegal to burn the flag, is what you're saying, or do anything to the flag that's like not within the certain parameters of you got to fold it in a specific way, and it has to be lit up if it's outside at night.
And this is according to the ACLU.
So
and
like anything outside of that would probably be considered desecration.
The problem
right?
with politics, though, Johnson, is that I almost feel like these votes are sometimes set up before they're made. Like, you know, the team captains go through, they count their folks, and they say, you know, we know this is going to pass, but we're going to let 65 of our most, the ones whose elections are in the balance, we're going to let them vote for it. But then we've got our 36 people that are going to vote against it, and we're good. I don't know. I mean, I'm skeptical when it comes to politics, whether who thought what at any given time. I'll bet you there are people that wanted to vote yes for it that voted no because they were told to, and people that wanted to vote no for it that voted yes because they were told to. I have no clue what this means. This is the problem with dealing with liars.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And apparently, unfortunately, they've been considering it again. At least this is from...
oh, boy.
Yeah, that'll make America better. We're in the throes of the Great Recession here. We could just eke our way out by outlawing the burning of the flag.
Well, it's not actually apparently when they're considering it again, it's not just the flag. It's also burning a copy of the Constitution would fall into the same.
Well, there you go.
Toll-free number tonight, 855-450-FREE. I'm just curious, back to the story here about the teenager who is facing 2 years for a Facebook photo where he's simulating a sex act with Jesus. What if you were to just, pretend like you're hanging off a cross, too? Would that also be desecrating the object? I mean, there's all kinds of things that
Not
can
on
offend
Easter.
people.
It's a passion play.
Well, what about the favorite pastime of both Christians and Muslims, burning the Quran or burning the Bible?
855-450-FREE. Just because it's tacky doesn't mean it should be illegal. There's a 17-year-old male who's currently facing 2 years in prison for having a Facebook photo taken of him in a sexual position with a kneeling statue of Jesus. And so you can probably figure it out what was going on there. So the story was actually posted earlier this afternoon, Mark, by you, I think, over at our Facebook and Google Plus and Twitter, which you can access, by the way, by going to news.freetalklive.com. And you posted it earlier, so there have been quite a few comments posted on this story about the young man who's facing prison time over a tacky picture. It's something that teenage boys are wont to do. is
Yeah.
to do silly things, exerting their sexuality on statues. In this case, no damage was done to the statue. No one has claimed that any damage was done to the statue. The only damage in some people's minds is just that. It's in their minds.
And
it's
I would think that this
offensive.
I would think that this young man is also expressing to some extent his religious beliefs. That he's not a believer in the Judeo-Christian Abrahamic tradition.
Who knows? He might be a Satanist.
That would be somebody who believed in that. It could
That's
be.
right.
The chances of him being a Satanist are far
Pretty
less than
low.
him being an atheist.
That's true.
Most people, many people claiming to be Satanists are in fact atheists, and then there's all the atheists that are atheist, and a great deal of the agnostics who are in fact atheists too. So you've got this large pool of people who are atheist compared to this small pool of people that are Satanists.
So here's the quote that I like from Facebook. Renee Pinto made this comment earlier today. She said, "Pretty sure the person in the statue, or rather the person the statue is of, that is Jesus, would just say to forgive the guy and carry on with life and love. What irony if he gets incarcerated by the owner of the statue. Do they not know that guy's philosophy?"
Well, I don't know how much the owner gets to say about it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Did the owner report it to the police, or did some offended citizen report it, and then the police just went ahead and took action without the consent of the owner?
Well, I think that the owner probably wants to be made whole in some way, but what we found over time here in Free Talk Live
There's no
is
damage.
I understand. They feel like they're damaged.
Uh-huh.
I said made whole in some way.
You're presuming that the owner feels that way, but
I
okay.
am. Yeah. What I suspect is that this young man could do, I don't know, an afternoon's work at the church, on the church grounds,
Sure.
cleaning up or
Paint
something like that.
or whatever.
And that suddenly things would be made right. And then that would be an opportunity to do some discipleship for the church. They could act like a bunch of overbearing jerks, but they'd probably be better off showing this person the love of Jesus. And, they have the opportunity to do some conversion. This would be a really great opportunity for this church if that's what they chose to do. But the state has gotten involved. And like we've seen so many times, like every time the state gets involved, they got to get their piece of it. It's like there's a story out from my town where a dog gets loose and kills some chickens. They issue a fine to the dog owner that then gets paid to the state for the owner
guy's
gets
still
nothing.
out his chickens.
Right. Makes
That's
no
how
sense.
crazy it is. And it's like that everywhere. And it's very rare that you'll hear about restitution being ordered, although it does happen in New Hampshire courts, Mark. I have seen restitution
Sure.
be ordered in some cases. I don't know why it's applied to some cases and why not to others. But regardless, but to me, there's no restitution owed in this case. You don't deserve restitution because you were offended, because somebody did something you didn't like. You could claim that he trespassed on the property, but then again, it was probably open to the public, and he had no idea that it was, it's probably not a no trespassing zone. So he likely didn't trespass.
He did it during the day.
Yeah, that's true. It's bright daylight out during this photo, and even if he'd done it at night, that wouldn't make it more illegal simply because it was nighttime. No damage was done, so therefore no restitution is owed, in my opinion.
I disagree. I think that that this brazen act of desecration of this formed piece of rock does put him into some debt to the church organization. And I think that an afternoon worth of painting a fence or something like that.
What do you think, Johnson? Does this young man owe restitution to the church?
No. I mean, why should he? He didn't damage anything.
Right. Somebody gets offended. So, Mark, are you saying every time somebody's offended about someone's behavior,
I'm not talking
that
about
they're owed
offense.
restitution?
I'm not talking about offense. I'm talking about trespassing. He wasn't
warned.
He committed.
It's not trespassing unless you're told it's trespassing.
When you go on somebody's property and you hump their venerated object, you know what you're doing. At that point, he has used the property in a manner that he knew from the very beginning, unless he's some kind of brain-addled twit. He knew that he was going on this property to defile their rock. And this is their rock, not his rock. So, yes, they have created some kind of mental damage, as it were, to their special rock.
I think that's opening up a Pandora's box,
well,
man.
I think what the clear course of action here is that the church now says that he's banned from the property. That's it. Done.
Yeah, that would be an appropriate thing, to where then if he came back after he had been warned, then it's trespassing.
I think you should
Then there's a tort.
I think you should spend an afternoon painting a fence. Look, here at the studio,
there's no damage. He didn't damage them in any way.
I've heard
so
that
now
argument.
they can say that he's banned, right? And they can also publicly embarrass him if they so want to, if the community cares. And there's
Not
their
a bad idea.
restitution. That's all that. If they want to say that, maybe they can Photoshop a picture of it the other way around.
What if
with Jesus in the standing position
sure
and
Jesus
him
would
in
love
the
that.
kneeling position? And there you go. There's your restitution.
I
Yeah.
think that the young man should make good on this for humping their special rock.
So
But-
you're arbitrarily picking out the number of an afternoon's worth of
Yep.
painting.
And then what do you do about all the Muslims and the Christians who have been burning the religious holy scriptures of the
That's
other
another
the
good
other
point.
one?
They
What
own
do you
them?
do with them?
They own them. They're not on their property. See, the reason this is a lesser included offense of trespassing, in my opinion. If he had trespassed, if they had put their special magic rock on public property, then I would have no problem.
Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense because it's still their rock. Even if it's on public property, it's still their property, is it not?
I don't think it does.
Or are you saying they would have donated it to
It's
the
an
public
abandoned
property?
rock at that point. That rock becomes public because it is on public property.
Mm-hmm.
They can maintain it, but it is what it is.
Well, okay. Well, Mark, so you're saying that you think he should do a day's worth or an afternoon's worth of painting or some other menial task at the
Yeah.
church. But what if other people think he should do a week's worth or 2 months' worth? I mean, it's all just completely arbitrary, isn't it? What is it worth? The defiling of a holy object. This should be years' worth of painting. I mean, this is Jesus we're talking about here. Why aren't you taking this seriously enough, Mark? One afternoon is not enough.
I've
Lop
got
his
a
head
question
off.
for you.
Lop his
Got a
head off
question,
right to the
Johnson?
lawn.
Stand by
question
with
for
that.
you.
We'll
Yep.
get into it here in a moment. I want to hear how you feel. Is there a restitution that this young man owes? Besides maybe an apology, if that. 855-450-FREE. So, Johnson, you had a question that you wanted to ask Mark, but we're going to need to recap briefly here. We were talking about property and property rights when it comes to stuff you donate. Because Mark had brought up this question about
Desecration of a venerated object.
Yeah, so what had happened originally was we were talking about an issue with a teenager. He's 17. He's charged with desecration of a venerated object in Pennsylvania for having a photo taken of him having a sexual position with a kneeling Christ statue. And that was offensive to some people, and the question kind of the conversation we had evolved into a larger discussion about property. And Mark, you said this was wrong for him to do this on someone's private property, and he therefore owed some sort of restitution. Johnson and I disagreed with that, saying that no damage was done. If somebody's offended by it, well, then, as Johnson pointed out, and I think rightly so, they can issue a no trespass notice now that they know that this young man may be a problem child and they don't want him on their property. Of course, as was pointed out on Facebook, the right thing to do for a Christian, ostensibly Christian church would be to forgive the young man and move on. But so everybody's got a different position on this. It led to another question about, well, what if the statue wasn't on private property but was in point of fact on public property? Would that change whether or not it would be legal to hump the statue? And then, Johnson, you have a related question.
So the question that I have is, and this is something that I had intent to do and still sort of have intent to do. I haven't gotten around to it, but there is you can get like Avery labels and where you can print your own labels and whatnot. And every time I've stayed at a hotel, I'm very offended by the fact that there's always these Bibles. And
is it always? I don't think it's every hotel chain.
I've never been to a hotel that hasn't had one.
Well, I don't look that hard, but they're certainly in lots of
hotels.
hotels.
There's always a Bible in those drawers in the hotels, and there's a label that you can get that
brought to you by the Gideons.
Yeah, brought to you by the Gideons, and there's a label that you can get who I don't know who it's brought to you by, but you can print out these labels and it says warning. It's like a big red label that says warning. This is a work of fiction. Do not take it literally. Content advisory contains verses descriptive of or advocating suicide, incest, bestiality, sadomasochism, sexual activity in a violent context, murder, morbid violence, use of drugs or alcohol, homosexuality, voyeurism, revenge, undermining of authority figures, lawlessness, and human rights violations and atrocities. Exposure warning. Exposure to contents for extended periods of time or during formative years in children may cause delusions, hallucinations, decreased cognitive and objective reasoning abilities, and in extreme cases, pathological disorders, hatred, bigotry, bigotry, and violence, including but not limited to fanaticism, murder, and genocide. And the idea is to print out these labels and slap them on the cover of the Bible.
Got it.
I think that's pretty funny. So the question is...
what do you think of that?
Well, I think that, as a renter, and that's what you're doing, you're renting the hotel for the evening, and as a renter, you have certain sort of, I think you have expectations that are reasonable, and that you're not going to be subjected to other people's religious beliefs might be one of them. So I think that when you choose to leave your religious text in hotel rooms around the country, that you're probably it's a reasonable thing at that point that people who have paid for those hotel rooms may toss them in the garbage.
Yeah, one passing thought here about the statue incident. We had this thing called Night of Lights around Christmas where I grew up, and people had those little deer light statues, and they invite people to go through their lawns and look at the neighborhood, and sometimes teenagers would go out there and put the deer, lights up to where it looks like they're trying to mate.
Oh,
and,
sure.
If a cop caught them, they were just like, don't do that, or the person who had the deer said, well, I don't appreciate you coming on my property anymore, and that was the end of it. Really
as it should be. I mean,
exactly.
You could argue that that's more offensive than what happened with the Jesus statue. By the way, for our listeners that don't know what we're talking about, earlier in the show tonight, there was an issue with a teenager who's facing prison time over a picture of him with his crotch near a kneeling Jesus. And so obviously some people are upset about that, but in relation to what should happen to him, I don't think there should be any sort of punishment. He didn't damage anything. At least you could argue with the deer that someone plucked it from the yard and it had to be placed back, that there was some level of effort involved in fixing that problem. But, I mean, if that's the worst thing that happens to your Christmas display, I think you're doing all right. And thank you for the call tonight, Rusty. I appreciate it.
There's a Wikipedia entry specifically for baby Jesus theft.
There's a lot of it, too.
Yeah, that does happen a lot. The toll-free number tonight is 855.
And you don't support that, right?
Of course not. That's theft.
Right.
Why would I support what? Why would you even have to ask that question?
Just making it clear for
the
folks.
toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. So,
and then, there's defacement. That stuff happens all the time. Is that a venerated
that's
object?
not okay.
Yeah,
Defacement's
it's not okay. No, it's not okay. But what I'm saying is that it happens all the time, and that the punishment. It's like, why is this case so special with this guy who took a photograph and didn't damage anything?
Right. Would he have to go to, if he had tagged the side of a building with graffiti, would he go to prison for 2 years? Would he be facing a charge like that?
In the area, there's another show on the Liberty Radio Network I was listening to earlier, Andrew Clark, and she had done some research into this and found out that in the area where he's at, the punishment for graffiti
damaging property.
Yeah, actually damaging property in that area is 1 year in jail, whereas it's 2 years
if you offend someone.
Right.
So we were talking about these Bible stickers. Johnson, there's a warning sticker that talks about all the the terrible stuff that happens in the Bible: murders, incests, rape, etc.
Right.
And then it also recommends that you be very cautious if you're going to pick this thing up and read it. That's in a short version. You read the whole thing earlier. The idea is to take these stickers in and lay them on top of the Gideon Bible. So attach it to a Bible that would be like in a hotel room or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's one idea. I mean, one of the other more despicable versions of that would be to go into bookstores and label the books in the bookstore.
That would be illegal. But the question I think you were asking earlier was specifically about the Gideon Bibles in hotel rooms, and that would be, is it a property rights violation to put a sticker on the Gideon Bible, being that, with the idea at least being that the Gideons have donated the Bible, and you said you heard, Johnson, that the hotels are okay with people taking those Bibles. Is that true?
Yeah. That's really the way out on this one is that these Bibles aren't fixtures.
They're not owned.
They're not fixtures of the room.
Right, unlike
like
taking
the chair.
a towel or a light bulb.
Right, these are donations to anybody who wishes to take them out of the hotel room. I'm sure you could go to the front of the hotel and say, hey, I'm down on my luck. Can I have a Gideon's Bible? And they would give it to you because they've got boxes of these things that Gideon donates to them. So they're, this noose is slipped at this point. Yes, you are allowed to stick a sticker on your Bible. And yes, you're allowed to leave it wherever you want.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.